streaming. Make sure that's going to be all
Okay.
right. Come on,
All right.
you little. All right, now I want to see the full screen. There we go. Now we can go full screen. Well, I don't want to go full screen either. Dadgummit. I'd like to see my chat screen. I'd like to see my chat. Okay, that'll
Yep.
work. All right. So I'm gonna start some my little musical intro for about 30 seconds, and then we'll rock and roll. So give me just a minute. I'm gonna turn my
Okay.
mic down.
Okay.
All right, everybody, and we're back with another edition of, I'll get my podcast name right this time, the Missouri Liberty Report. Last week I said the Push for Liberty, which is my old one, so I sounded completely foolish right from the get-go. But now I've got my name right, so we can start off on the right foot. So I am very pleased to have with me a man by the name of Patrick Holland. He is from the Missouri Freedom Initiative, and I think you're going to like what this gentleman has done, but I will let him speak for himself. I will not go into detail. We'll let Patrick do that, but this is one of those times, another one of those groups that we all need to know about. We need to educate ourselves about. It's another group that we can work with to further the idea of freedom and liberty in Missouri. So, Patrick, how are you doing this evening, sir?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a
Yeah,
pleasure.
you know,
And
go ahead.
you're right. It's all about liberty and freedom, isn't it? Especially in Missouri. My God, we have it going on here. If other states aren't paying attention to us, they're just not paying attention.
You know, I think some of them are, and they're probably, let's face it, we've been going down, most of the states have been going down the same old road for a long time. And now and Missouri finally woke up. We got SAPA, the governor signed the SAPA SAPA law into act. We made other states take notice, but we'll see how well they follow suit. It would be great to see a lot more states do that, because I think that sends a warning shot to the feds and a kind of a wake-up call to say, hey, you can pass stupid laws and we can choose to ignore them. But why don't you go ahead at first, Patrick, and just give us a little background information on yourself and the Missouri Freedom Initiative, and then we'll go into some of the things you guys have accomplished.
Sure. Okay. It's for me, for as far as basically the liberty movement goes in the state of Missouri. It started for me with the pro-life movement about 25 years ago, and it started with a guy I knew at church. His name was Carl Schmidt, and he basically voice for life, the Catholic side of the pro-life movement. He introduced me to other people on the other side, which is Missouri Right to Life. And so basically, we began a very long, productive relationship and made a lot of changes in the state of Missouri. I mean, that we have virtually no Planned Parenthood centers in Missouri anymore, but that's because of the work of these two organizations. But what's great about it, what I love to say about this aspect of my life, which shifted in 2016 into the gun arena, and that sounds strange, but we'll get to that in a bit, is that the Protestants and the Catholics work together, for life.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a beautiful thing, because I know they chide each other. They give each other a hard time sometimes. But yeah, we all saw that as an imminent threat. And we're guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence. And so that's something we could all come together and acknowledge. Now, I kind of shifted my focus to help raise awareness for, and now we're shifting into the 2015-2016 timeframe. And this is me. This is not the organization yet. And what it was the concealed carry, Missouri constitutional concealed carry. That got onto the ballot. If you remember, it was on the same ballot that we elected Trump with. Basically, for those of you who remember that far back, the ballot in the state of Missouri. And so I was raising awareness for that in the state of Missouri at the time. And so that's something that, kind of got me into the gun thing. And then, gun thing, I shouldn't say gun thing. I should say our right to bear
There you go.
arms. So I should be more specific about that. So here comes,
What is going
with my YouTube channel called the Truth, Money, and Freedom Podcast, which is another YouTube channel we have that has a different focus, though, than the Missouri Freedom Initiative. I reported on a fake news story. And that fake news story said that basically the Second Amendment Preservation Act had passed the Senate and the House in the General Assembly and was waiting for a signature by the governor. That was false. That did not happen. But I reported it as though it were true off a website called The Sentinel, and I didn't double check. I could have easily have picked up the phone and made a phone call to my rep or my senator to verify, and I didn't. So what happened was, because that story I did on the Truth, Money, and Freedom podcast on YouTube, there's two guys, and Jimmy D, and I'm not going to give his actual name because that's what he goes by, and then David Burden. These two guys had contacted me and said, you got this YouTube channel thing going on, and we need more coverage for the Second Amendment Preservation Act in the state of Missouri. And believe me, that it gets better from here. But basically, he got me involved in the fight for SEPA. As opposed to just reporting on it, I actually got involved. And getting involved is another story in itself. But that's what started the basically the pressure that was building in this pressure cooker called the General Assembly. Because all I really truly did was use Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, social media to raise awareness about what the Second Amendment Preservation Act was and the fact that we were trying to get it done in Missouri. So 2020, if you remember, the government got shut down because of COVID. And so we couldn't finish, but we were just about ready to wrap that up and get it done in 2020. In 2021, we got it done. And what that means, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about with SEPA, or the Second Amendment Preservation Act in the state of Missouri, is basically in the state of Missouri, we no longer acknowledge federal gun laws. Now, Missouri's gun laws very closely mirror federal gun laws, but we don't actually enforce federal gun laws in the state of Missouri anymore. And if someone tries to enforce a federal gun law, there's a $50,000 penalty. So that's what we're talking about. It's 10th Amendment stuff. It's anti-commandeering doctrine stuff. Other states are trying to get this done now too. So that's the brief version of it. We can get into minutia and other details of basically getting the organization up and running, and like I said, it's a loose organization. It's not like we have membership dues or anything like that, or there's a sign up, or it's just people that are following what we're doing on social media. And it's not just that we're reporting on what's going on, but we're also letting them know what they can do right now at this moment to further the legislation, to take it further, to take it, to the finish line, because that's what it's all about in Missouri politics. Over 1,000 bills get introduced every year, gang, in the state of Missouri, and generally less than 100 of them actually make their way to the governor's desk. So the truth of the matter is, if you know how to get it from, sorry about my
no
dog
problem.
there. If you know how to get it from legislation to the governor's desk, you win. That's the way it works.
I got one whining in the background too, so it's all good. It's
Yep.
my son's dog whining in the background. It's bleeding through two doors, so no big deal. You bring up SEPA, and I was notified by one of my listeners when I did a small test live stream on YouTube the other evening. And now I can't remember the actual bill name. I want to say it's 2072. Now, it's an omnibus bill, but in that bill, is a section of that bill is saying if this passes, that if you have a medical marijuana card, that no federal agency or federal employee is allowed to be notified that you have a medical marijuana card. Now, they're supposed to have a rally the 29th at the state capitol at 9 a.m., which I think I'm actually going to take a vacation day and go to. What I'm curious is if they're doing this because when I talk to people at work about this, they're like, well, if you have a firearm and you get a medical marijuana card, then there's a federal law saying you can't own a firearm. I said, yeah, but Missouri's not enforcing that. I'm hoping the reason
That's
that they're
correct.
passing this is that so if you are a firearm owner and you do get a medical marijuana card, they won't even know you have it. I'm hoping that's the case.
Hmm. I'm hoping so too, and I'm not sure because I haven't looked into that piece of legislation. We're working heavily on 2118 right now, which is the stand your ground law. It's cementing that. So we're concentrating on that, and also Susie Pollock's bill to make sure that vaccination centers don't get set up in public schools in the state of Missouri because we've been given $1.9 billion from the federal government to do so. So, but it's good we talk because I didn't even know about what you're talking about. I didn't know about that bill, but it sounds to me like they may be doing something like that. Nullification is happening in the state of Missouri, and other states are doing it too. Nullification of federal law. So, and the feds simply don't have the resources to actually police, on that level and to enforce the laws on that level. They simply don't have
Yeah,
it. That's the beauty
that's
of
what
it.
I tell my listeners a lot. That people are like, well, there's, the feds say this and the feds say that, and I said yes, but unfortunately for the federal government, and fortunately for us, they don't have enough manpower to send in here to enforce their laws. They depend on the state to do it for them with some cash or something. They throw them some money and they'll do our bidding. But if the state continues to ignore bad laws or bad regulations, then they don't have enough manpower either. So it's a wonderful thing. I made a comment on Twitter the other day that maybe we should stop calling ourselves the Show Me State and we should change our motto to the Nullification State, because we set the groundwork with SEPA, and if we continue down this road, things only get better from here. But we also have to have reps and a governor with a backbone. And sometimes they don't have a backbone on certain issues. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. And I agree with you. We are nullifying things here. In fact, we have some very interesting bills that I'm not sure that they're going to pass this year, but they have incredible potential to create death by a thousand cuts of the federal government. That we just nullify, or more specifically, we have to go through an approval process for every single piece of regulation that comes out of the executive branch of government. This is stuff that's not coming from Congress, that comes directly from the EPA, the ATF, organizations like this. And that's Mike Moon's bill. So that's something that that probably could, get a little bit more interest, I think. And it's up to us to bring that to people. The problem with, and it's not just a problem in Missouri, it's a problem in all states, is that people are not looking at because all the focus is always on the federal side. And that's where we need to literally forget about. The federal government, gang, from my opinion, the federal government is not worth your time. These guys are bought and paid for so many times at the federal level, they don't even know who they work for anymore. And if you focus on the state level, where your assemblymen, are your neighbors, they're not living in tall castles, like those in Washington are. So they're much more accountable to the people. And so you actually can get stuff done at your state level and at your county level and in some cases city level.
Yeah, and one of my listeners just said jury nullification as well. Not just, we don't have to always
Yes.
depend on our state reps. We can nullify bad laws in a courtroom, and there's no law against jury nullification. That's why the system's set up the way it is. If you think that a law is unjust or unconstitutional, then if there's a jury trial, you can nullify it there as well. So I know you said that SEPA was, you guys put a lot of work in. You kind of told me a story the other night of the night that I guess it was on the floor, and how you got people to come together and make a lot of phone calls. Tell my listeners about that, because
Indeed.
that was amazing to hear and fascinating. I'd like for you to share that with my audience.
Sure. Okay, so this is before SEPA passed, before it's a law. It's being debated on the Senate floor. There's a filibuster going on, so that kind of sets the stage. The Democrats are filibustering. They're talking about baseball games. They talk about all kinds of stuff when they filibuster. They just fill time. And so during that time, I was in contact with multiple people on the floor. And I don't know if I need to bring up all their names, but just say that several senators, one representative, and then two other individuals that were very influential with SEPA were actually on the floor of the Senate. And I'm texting with them while I'm live streaming on Truth, Money, and Freedom podcast. And by the way, we're live streaming. They do have audio feeds, though. So what we were doing, we did what Jimmy D called a Ubatubathon. We literally were streaming that live while we were encouraging all people to call into the Senate. At the same time, I'm constantly pushing out all the information people need to contact their senators. And during that filibuster time, during that Ubatubathon, we figured we had about 600 phone calls go into Jefferson City during that 11-hour period, and that's just from our group, that we now call the Missouri Freedom Alliance. That doesn't mean that there weren't people from other groups calling, but this is okay. This is where the rubber hits the road for everyone who's listening today, and it doesn't matter what state you're in. And in fact, if you're in another state, we really encourage you to watch what we're doing here, because it doesn't take that many phone calls to move a senator or a general assemblyman, a House member. Believe it or not, gang, those guys don't get many calls or visits. And when someone makes one phone call to a representative, sometimes it can change their mind. If they get a dozen phone calls, they feel they're being, harassed actually on a single issue. So it doesn't take that many phone calls to get good work done at a state level. Federal, forget it. You know why the state people aren't getting phone calls? Because anyone who's politically active is calling the federal government. No one's watching at the state level. And that's, if we can actually come together and fix our own states, then our states can come together and fix the federal government. I mean, it's a very simple concept. And we have all kinds of mechanisms, that are available to us in the Constitution of the United States as well, which, by the way, everyone says, oh, my constitutional rights. You don't have any rights in the Constitution. The Constitution is basically a set of limits on the federal government, how far its power goes. Your rights are in the Bill of Rights, the 10 amendments to the Constitution. That's where your rights are. And then the Declaration of Independence is kind of like the preamble to the Constitution. So as we look into what it means, what's in the American experience, what does it mean to be American? The freedoms that we enjoy, everyone keeps forgetting about the responsibility that comes with that freedom. It's up to us to be watching government, because media is not doing it. They're not doing their job. Therefore, we have to pay attention. We have to make phone calls. We have to send emails. We have to visit our elected officials and make sure they stay on the straight and narrow, and make sure they understand what issues are important to us. And for me, just for me personally, the two big issues that I've been involved in are pro-life and Second Amendment issues. But there are other things, like, for instance, one thing that our organization's looking into is, and we've looked into it very seriously, which is getting rid of property taxes in the state of Missouri. That's something that I would really like to do. Those are evil taxes. They're the most unethical tax that we have, as a civilization. In other words, I don't pay my taxes, they take my house away, even though I've paid my house off. It literally works that way, gang. People have got to stop thinking they own their homes. You're leasing your home, and to whoever the bondholder is. In this case, in the state of Missouri, it's your county.
Yeah, and here, it was February the 11th, actually, a month ago. I had Senator Bill Eigel on with me for a short interview, and we were talking about his push to eliminate the personal property tax. And he said, people
Hmm.
have to understand that depending on the size of your county, because even up until that point, I wasn't aware of, I thought the county pretty much kept the money. He said, no, on average, 15 to 20% they keep. The rest goes to the state.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, I was unaware of that. And I think that's quite an important point to make, especially when you're trying to tell people, trying to convince them, hey, here's things about the personal property tax that you don't know. That's an important point because I think a lot of people think the county gets the money, and when they
Hmm.
hear like Gasconade County's a small county, if we're only keeping 15% of that money, but yet the county is the one that sends out the personal property tax bill. It makes you think, now, why are they only getting 15% when they're literally the ones sending you out the assessment forms and then sending you the bill in the mail? My other
Hmm.
my other thing that I keep pounding home on this is we have a lot of state reps, especially in the rural areas, who like to say they're pro farmer. But I don't know how you can say you're pro farmer and send these farmers these personal property tax bills at the end of the year where every piece of farm equipment, every head of cattle or horses or what, all their livestock, everything they have to account for and pay property taxes on. I don't know how you can be pro farmer and then send them this bill at the end of the year that you want them to pay when farmers struggle enough. I think if we're going to be pro farm, especially family farm, one of the things we have to look at is eliminating their tax burden. And I'm not talking about subsidies from the government taking money from some and giving it to others. I'm talking about just eliminating their tax, or at least one tax burden on farmers. I think it is a very big insult for these guys to say this kind of thing, but then not be willing to have and not have the intestinal fortitude to say, well, I just can't see eliminating the personal property tax. Well, then you're not pro farmer. I hate to be that blunt, but to me, that's honestly the case. If you're gonna back up small business like you say you do, if you're gonna back up family farms, then the next logical step is to take another tax burden away from those people.
Hmm. Agreed. And it's good you bring that up. I mean, and Eigel's a friend to our organization too. And the personal property tax thing, and you're talking about small business and family farms, that sort of thing. The federal government has been an enemy to family farming for a long time in many ways. I mean, look at the death tax.
Yep.
I mean, that's a really good example, and that's how you see families lose their farms, and it happens literally. All it takes is a generation, unless they actually have done something legally to make sure that it doesn't end up, in probate. But it's actually it's holy mackerel. I mean, we love to talk about how awesome the United States is, how free we are, but everyone, needs to understand something. You're only as free as that personal property tax lets you be. And that's it. I mean, because that's where it all begins and ends. You don't own land. Even the founding fathers said land ownership was the beginning of freedom. That's the beginning of it. It's not even the end. And we don't have property ownership. This is why the Libertarian Party has suffered so greatly over the years, because that's the concrete foundation of the Libertarian Party is land ownership. And we grossly misuse that term when we talk about the homes we have and the businesses we have and the farms we have. We don't own anything, gang. We lease it from whoever created that magical bond out of nothing, saying that they own it. A little piece of paper that says they own it. They created it all by with nothing backing it up, and then you have to pay taxes on it because they hold it. Used to be in the United States of America, you could buy back that bond, and that was under the oh boy, what was the name of that again? I can't remember the name of the law that when it was here forever. It was here for over 100 years. Homestead Act. The Homestead Act. You could buy the bond back, and that way you would own it. It would become private property. So, and we can get into the intricacies of that another podcast and everything, but it is a problem that we need to deal with in the state of Missouri. And Senator Bill Eigel has been at the forefront of this particular issue, and in St. Charles. And I do believe in St. Charles they have something very special going on. I think in St. Charles they don't have school tax on property taxes, personal property tax. I think it's through a sales tax. So their property tax is lower because of that, significantly lower, actually.
Patrick, it's one of those things where when certain reps talk about ending the personal property tax, we all know the direction that those who don't want to get rid of it are going to come from. They're going to say, well, if you end the personal property tax, you're not going to have, your schools are going to turn into crap, and fire departments,
your
and police
sheriff's department, your anti-fire department.
Yep. And it's like, okay, well then riddle me this, Batman. How in the heck do the 29 states that don't have a personal property tax still have schools and police departments and fire departments? Because the government figures out a way to supplement that money, whether it's through sales taxes or whatever. They still fund all these things. So I guess people aren't thinking out far enough to say, well, their state, and it could be that some people just actually don't know that some states don't have personal property taxes. But that's something else that we have to educate people on, because, for the most part, your state government's not going to tell you that. You have to figure that out on your own, or have a rep who's honest enough, like Bill Eigel, to say, there's 29 other states that have it. The other thing that we need to understand, which I was unaware of, I was wrong on my number until I interviewed him, is he said, oh, by the way, we have the third highest rate out of those 21 states that have a personal property tax. And it's like, that's a little bit bigger sting than we're already feeling, to know that out of those 21, we're the third highest. And this is something that I've been beaten hard on this drum for quite a while on personal property taxes. This and the drug war are the two things that I pound home a lot to my listeners. Now, I know personal property tax, most people go, yeah, that'd be great to not have that bill at the end of the year. The drug war is a little more touchy for people because, a lot of families are affected by addiction, maybe overdoses and that thing. So when you start saying, I'd like to see an end to the war on drugs, people kind of back away from you like you're crazy. Now, we have state reps and we have federal government agencies telling us that if we end the war on drugs, then there will be cartels running everywhere. And that defies all common sense, because if you legalize it, the price on those goods go down. The cartels' money dries up. I hate to tell them that, but that's the case.
Well, the cartels all are running the drugs right now. They're called the CIA.
Yes, and the DEA is price control.
Everyone knows it. It's that's this. The CIA is running drugs in America. Most people know this. This is partially how they fund their operations. The CIA doesn't get enough black budget money from the federal government for all the things it wants to do. Therefore, it has all kinds of front businesses and drug running and all that kind of stuff that they use. So, and by the way, this isn't conspiracy theory stuff. This is actually pretty well established. So, at any rate, yeah, the cartels are running the drugs. It's the CIA.
Yeah. And I urge my listeners to read the book from Gary Webb, Dark Alliance, on the whole Iran-Contra scandal and the cocaine trafficking. I mean, I think people will be, if they sit down, it's a big book, and it's chock full of information, but I think if people sat down, some of their jaws would drop. I mean, you get a third of the way into the book, and you read it and you go, okay, at some point I have to sit down and literally read it again, because there's so much information, so many names in this book, that I had to read it a second time before I really grasped everything that he put in there. And unfortunately, he well, supposedly took his own life, but his brother, I guess his brother was a doctor and would try to get him to come in for like a yearly physical, and he said I couldn't get him to come in and do that because he was so scared of the sight of blood, but yet he slit his wrist in the bathtub at some hotel out in the middle or motel out in some podunk town somewhere. And there's a movie called The Great White Hope that was on Netflix. It's a documentary and it's on the drug war. And there's a gentleman on there by the name of Freeway Ricky Ross, who was LA's biggest crack cocaine dealer. He could make $1 million in a week. He said that Gary Webb called him on the phone while Rick Ross was in prison. And he said the guy was truly bummed out and said, I have people climbing phone poles outside my house looking in my windows. And so you think, well, that would make someone kill themselves, or would it? Or, I mean, if someone's climbing the phone poles outside your house trying to see in, they really don't like you. They really, really don't like you. So, okay, another.
Or they're just plain creepy.
And I mean, how would you mentally hold together if you have agents literally climbing phone poles to look in your house? I don't know how mentally you would hold together. That's a heck of a lot of stress for someone to be under when all they did
Absolutely.
was tell the truth and document everything and all the interviews he did and all the info he dug up. So, Patrick, one other thing you said to me during our talk on Saturday, and you mentioned right before the show, is that you're really big in the pro-life movement as well. Why don't you enlighten my listeners on some of that work that you've done too?
Sure. Now, I'm going to talk really more about the state of the pro-life movement in the state of Missouri. Let me do that because the accomplishments, are nothing really, really dramatic. It's not something that, it's a lot of hard work over a long period of time that culminated in basically Planned Parenthood centers being shut down in the state of Missouri. And of course, I'm one of many working on this. But the state of and I'm going to compare us to Texas here real quick. We had Dave Clemens on our show a couple of months back talking about what's going on in Texas. What is the abolitionist movement? Why aren't we embracing that in Missouri like other states want to? Abolition movement is basically just stop abortion, just end it. Now, although that people who are in pro-life do want that, but there's always blowback when you do it that hard and that fast, from the other side. So that's something that we always have to be aware of. So these slow incremental steps have taken us to this point. In the state of Missouri, you can get an abortion up to 8 weeks, during the pregnancy, and that's where it stops. Now, here's the thing. The state of Missouri has something different. Just like our Second Amendment Preservation Act has teeth in it, consequences. Our law is different than anyone else's law. It makes it more special, makes it more meaningful, and it keeps the Fed out. So what we did with basically, I would say with the movement that we've done here is we have to have an ultrasound in the state of Missouri in order to have an abortion. Texas doesn't have that. So Texas has 6 weeks, for an abortion. They squished it down to 10 weeks. But I do believe that within a year or two, we'll see that Missouri has fewer abortions per capita. The reason being is we snuck that in the state of Missouri, that ultrasound. The Democrats didn't seem to care about that. What they cared about was the 8 weeks versus 6. Right? They cared about the time period. What the Democrats, and I'm talking about Democrats in the General Assembly.
Right.
Okay. So, the objections, were somewhat, muted. But they didn't care about the ultrasound thing. We did. Because we know statistically 71% of women that see their child on an ultrasound will not get an abortion.
Ah.
So if you want an abortion in the state of Missouri, you have to get an ultrasound. And so, and Planned Parenthood, by the way, Planned Parenthood doesn't provide that service, by the way, just so you know. So they send them over to the pregnancy care centers. These are the centers that are supported by the pro-lifers and by churches across, the state of Missouri. So that way we get a chance to talk to these young ladies that are coming in and thinking about, making a big mistake, in my opinion.
That's interesting.
So that no other state has done it this way. We do things a little differently here in Missouri, and a lot of people think we're backwards hillbillies. Trust me, there's very, very smart people literally working, the General Assembly here. Very, very intelligent people. And yeah, we go about things a little bit differently, but the end result is usually better than the states that, hey, abolition movement, let's get abortion down to 4 weeks, down to 6 weeks. Well, heck, it wouldn't matter anymore. We have that 71% statistic on our side with the ultrasound. So 71% of women who go in and get that ultrasound are not getting their abortions now. I'll bet you our numbers are significantly lower than Texas's that has a 6-week time period for an abortion with no ultrasound.
That's really a really intelligent move. There's just no other way to put it. That is a really intelligent move. And when you said that, I thought, yeah, because if they hear the heartbeat or see the baby or whatever, that changes things.
That's right.
Changes the mentality of that person.
It's a there's a live creature there. There's life. And that's what the other side doesn't want you to think. Oh, it's not alive. It's basically it's a symbiotic.
Just a clump of cells.
It's a clump of cells. So at any rate, that's what we've done in the state of Missouri, and it will take another year to bear out. To be able to prove that our move was possibly a better move than just shortening the abortion, period. I think our numbers are going to actually be better. And so what we do is, basically we move in small moves and we move incrementally and we move very smartly. And that's what we do, as opposed to just shoving, literally bringing the hammer down on those who would support abortion, which is what they were doing in Texas. And look at Missouri, we're not even on the national radar for our abortion laws. Texas is all over the radar. Everyone's giving them a hard time. And, the liberals are, and by the way, that was maybe a smart move on Texas's point. I'm going to say one more thing here, actually, because it sounds like I was bashing on Texas.
Right.
I'm not. Texas does a lot of things great. They really do. Maybe they did the abolitionist 6-week move in order to get some of the blue out of Texas, because a lot of blue has moved into Texas, particularly in the last 10 years. And there's so many incensed liberals that want their abortion rights, that are very upset with what Texas did. And maybe they're moving out of Texas, and maybe that was their plan to begin with. I don't know. So, that may be a smart move for them. Plan. We don't have, we're not turning purple anywhere near the rate that Texas is. But if we keep bringing in the illegals and transplanting them here from the southern border in Missouri, we could turn purple pretty quick. That's something also, that's on my radar. And also, there's a guy in our organization, Casey Rich, and that is on his radar, seriously on his radar. And so that's another thing we have to be looking at in the state of Missouri here. We've got to monitor the amount of illegals that are coming into the state of Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful to see what has been accomplished by some of our reps. The guys I point out are like, Bill Eigel, Mike Moon, Bob Onder, some of these guys in the conservative caucus. Now, the first time I heard conservative caucus, I'll be honest, I was like, it's probably some stupid Republican group. They like to say that they're pro-freedom, but they end up being big government Republicans. But Mike Moon, Bob Onder, and Bill Eigel are three guys that you can pretty much count on every single freaking time that are on the right side of the issue. Now, what's disappointing to me is I heard that Mike Moon is going to be running for U.S. Senate or U.S. House of Representatives, and
I
and
believe
Bob
it's a
Onder
House.
is running for, I think it's what, St. Louis County Commissioner, something to that effect. And I'm thinking
I think so.
probably two of the best guys we have as state legislators could be gone. And I'm thinking, I hate to say it about Mike Moon because he's such a great guy, but I seriously hope he doesn't
Yes, he
win and
is.
he stays here in the state because he does too much good
Yeah.
to go up there in D.C. And I hate to say anything bad, but just to be stuck in um, the quagmire of D.C. just, ugh.
Yeah. Well, the same thing could be said about our Attorney
Yes.
General, Eric Schmidt, who is running for the Senate as well. I prefer him stay behind and run for governor in 2024. That'd be my personal preference. But of course, it's his career, it's his life. Um, you know, and I've given a lot of thought to what you're saying. Our organization is going to help vet those that are running for office. We're going to be sending out surveys through our website, and all of our members will be emailing those surveys out to people, and we'll get those surveys back and we'll post them very publicly, and we'll do a scoring system based on how they answer the surveys. And so we're going to start vetting these people running for office, and we're certainly going to let people know, and if you've got, 5 people running for one seat, all we're going to do is a process of elimination, who we shouldn't be voting for. We're not going to tell anyone who to vote for, but we certainly want to let them know who is not Second Amendment friendly. SEPA is the standard across the United States of America now for what being a Second Amendment supporter means. If you do not support SEPA, you are not Second Amendment friendly. You will not make the list. You will not make the cut. Do you want federal government, basically telling people in your state, what they can do with guns, what they can own, how many they can own, how many bullets they can have in a magazine, whether or not they can have an AR-15 lower, because that kind of crap is coming down the pike. It's not about being, I support everyone's right to have guns, but what they forget to say is, but I only want you to have, 8 rounds in your magazine, no more than that. But yes, you can have a gun with 8 rounds. That's not Second Amendment friendly material, gang. We have to be very, very clear on who is pro Second Amendment in the state of Missouri as we go into this election cycle.
Yeah, we had there's friends of mine that would try to get local people together just to talk about the state of the state of affairs and our local area and at the federal level, state level, and everything. So one of the actually city aldermen attended the meeting, and then he invited our county sheriff to the meeting as well, and he showed up. And they were basically saying, are you a constitutional sheriff? And he said, well, I support the Second Amendment. And she goes, I get that, but are you a constitutional sheriff? And he didn't know how to respond to that. Now, I know the guy, and he's not a bad guy. I don't, and he's not one to go in and escalate a situation and things like that. But it made him a little uneasy because he didn't know how to answer the question. But it's like those are things that any county you live in, you have to know. Does your sheriff understand the Constitution? Does he understand your Bill of Rights?
But it's more than that, isn't it? A constitutional sheriff is a sheriff that's not going to acknowledge federal gun laws that actually go against your constitutional rights, because the sheriff has that ability. The sheriff can decide what laws are applicable in his county. Believe it or not, many people don't know that.
Yes.
That is absolutely the case. So if the federal government says, hey, it's illegal, for you to, drive a car, the sheriff is going to say, I'm sorry, that's not constitutional. And in my county, you can drive a car. That's what a constitutional sheriff is. All unconstitutional laws are null and void in his county. We're his jurisdiction.
Yeah, and what was cool is, Tom Woods, this was back in, it might have been last year, it might have been towards the end of 2020, I'm not sure. But Tom Woods interviewed Sheriff David Hathaway, and he was out of Arizona. And I convinced him. I asked him if he would do an interview with me, and this was during the whole when with COVID, the COVID lockdowns, shutdowns, the mandates were just stupid. He is one of the few sheriffs that just told, the county commissioners, the attorneys, all that. He's like, I'm not enforcing mask mandates. I'm not going to require my deputies to be vaccinated. I'm not even going to ask them because it's not okay for me to ask them their vaccination status. He literally looked up statutes, typed it up, sent it to the attorney, and actually other surrounding counties took that same thing, typed it up, and sent it to their attorneys and said, we're not doing it either. It was so good to hear a sheriff who knew exactly what powers he had and what powers he did not have, and that he understood, people's Bill of Rights, and knew them like the back of his hand, and said, "Yeah, I'm just not doing that." And I thought, because even around here, we saw, somebody in the restaurant got COVID, like that worked there. They just shut it down for 2 weeks, and I'm thinking, that person can just stay home. The restaurant can stay open. Why are we doing this ridiculous nonsense? Why? And again, we didn't have the lockdowns and the shutdowns here. Now, St. Louis County, Jackson County, they were awful. But it was just so nice to hear a sheriff said, I'm not doing any of that. And, he was in a bigger county, and he just said, I'm not doing it. And in fact, when he was running for sheriff, and they had like a little debate, and he was asked the question, will you do these things? And he said no. Now, some of his friends said, you just committed political suicide. And then the election results came out, and he won. He had double the votes of the second place person running for that spot, which tells you that the people liked what they heard and said, that's the guy we want, because we don't want to follow suit like California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, and some of these states. And so I have to ask you, did you have any like interactions with state reps over the whole COVID madness, the whole COVID nonsense?
Oh my God, yes. A lot of interactions. I was up there quite a bit. And it's not just me, by the way. I mean, I'm maybe the most visible and vocal guy of the group, but there's been others, like Jimmy D. I said a little bit about Jimmy D. He was heavily involved getting SEPA done and making visits to Jeff City. It's not just about phone calls and emails, folks. If you make a physical appearance up in Jefferson City and visit your rep, that has a very, very big impact, more so than a phone call or an email. So it's a long trip for many of us. It's expensive in gasoline. Gosh, it's expensive in gasoline. But it does make a difference. So it's very important that, son of a gun, my phone keeps going off. But it does make a difference, and it's something that we need to keep in mind at all times here when we're talking about keeping our freedoms, because the state of Missouri can keep our freedoms for us. We can do it through the 10th Amendment, and we've done it with SEPA. We're trying to do it with other things now, too. The work that's been done here for the pro-life movement is astounding, and I do believe within 1 year it'll bear out that Missouri was smarter than all the other states put together on how we chose to go forward, with what we've done with abortion. And I know that we get the abolitionist movement said, well, if you're going to take it that far, you can take it all the way. It's difficult. They don't get it. Many of them don't understand the backlash that you will enjoy from the abolition and, or getting rid of abortion altogether. I don't mean to go down that path again, but Missouri's different. We're very different down here. And maybe it's a good thing that the states see us as hillbillies and hicks and, just stupid people. Maybe it's good because we don't get that much federal attention. Oh, enter SEPA.
Yep.
Once we got the Second Amendment Preservation Act, we went on the radar. Once we nullified federal gun law in the state of Missouri, then we were on the radar as a bunch of crazy hicks. It's the Wild West
Oh
out in
God.
Missouri,
Yeah.
you know. Uh, so that's the first time we really got on the radar for anything we've done legislatively was the Second Amendment Preservation Act. The abortion thing that we've done here, 8 weeks with an ultrasound. That didn't make the radar. Texas, 6 weeks, no ultrasound. That made the radar. So, but at any rate, I love this state. I'm very proud of this state. But I want to say again, there's a lot of people working for freedom in the state of Missouri. Our organization, and I am so proud of some of our folks. Casey Rich, who's actually made more trips to Jefferson City than I have this year. I have a Liberty Revolutionary, Caleb, in my organization who is extremely active as well. And there's many others. There's other organizations. We're working with Jody Grace's group too, and that's Make Missouri Great Again. And then United We Stand Missouri. I mean, there's a bunch of organizations out there, but that was the last point that I was about to bring up, and I'm sorry for interrupting you. Missouri's got something very special and very different going on here. These grassroots organizations, people that are willing to fight for freedom, are growing so exponentially large in Missouri that it's actually, I think it's probably the only state you want to live in right now in the United States under Joseph Biden as the president of the United States.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, and now I can't remember what I was gonna say. No,
I'm sorry,
you're
I
fine,
interrupted
dude.
you, man.
I brought you on here to talk, not just me talk. So it's all good. But well, I know what I was gonna say. I was gonna say we got called flyover country, and we get called flyover country. But you know what?
Yes.
I'm fine with the fact that the feds could just keep flying over us and ignoring us. I think that's kind of a compliment. Great. Leave us the hell alone. We're fine with that. We're fine with you not acknowledging our existence because that means our life here is going to be a little simpler. Maybe we'll be a little more prosperous because you guys don't think we're worth the time. And I don't want us to be worth their time. I'd assume they act like we don't exist, and then we act like they don't exist. And I think, that's a pretty good relationship to have with your federal government. They act like you don't exist, and you get to act like they don't exist. And I think that's a pretty beautiful thing. Now, I said the wrong number at the end of the or the beginning of the show, Patrick. It's HB 2704, I believe, is the bill with the medical marijuana card. Now, one of my listeners, John Grady.
Okay.
John, if you're, I know you're still here. 2704, is that the one on the basically cannabis freedom, where federal agencies nor employees can know your medical marijuana card status if you have one or not? I'll wait for his response. Now, do you have time to hang on for a little while longer, Patrick?
Sure.
Okay. I'm coming up on the end of a radio recording for radio, and then I'll just have to. Okay, so 2704 is the bill. It's an omnibus bill. Again, March 29th at 9 o'clock in the morning, which is a Tuesday. I think I'm actually going to take a vacation day that day and go up to the Capitol for the rally. And I'm hoping that I may be able to get some time to talk to Representative Hicks and get his thoughts behind this bill. Because, like I said, I think it's about, you having a medical marijuana card and the federal law saying, well, if you have that, you can't own a firearm. And I guess this is their end around to say, well, they won't even know you have it, which is fine by me because that's your they love to talk about health information privacy. Well, people use medical marijuana for their health, and that should be something that's none of the federal government's business. It's a plant. Just back off. I love how they think that if you smoke marijuana that you go out on these killing sprees. That's another mentality that I don't understand. I've never seen a pothead with a firearm get high and then go, you know what? That neighbor across the street really making me mad. I'm going to go blow his head off right now. That is the exact opposite of what they're going to do. I do not understand that mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to eat a bag of Fritos first. Trust me, gang. So
then when they come down, then I'm going to shoot my neighbor.
The Fritos.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a
Yeah,
great
and
thing.
I don't understand. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. By the way, I am not on the war on drugs. I'm sorry. I'm not a big fan of that because it has not worked. It's been incredibly expensive, and all it's really done is expand drug use across the United States of America and getting it to younger kids as well. Remember, gang, the war on drugs is not real. It's an illusion. The CIA is actually responsible for getting drugs into the United States from South America and from Asia. That's who does it. I mean, that's the carrier. And once it gets in, into those areas, then, basically then, the smaller groups take over. But the CIA is the big runner, moving it across continents. And that's not private business. That's not, well, it is a cartel, but it's the Central Intelligence Agency. And they do it for money. It's not like they want people on drugs. I mean, they just want the money. And so it's a business they run.
Yeah, I don't know if
So
you ever heard of William Norman Grigg. Um,
I have
okay, well, he
not.
used to he had the vocabulary of a full dictionary. The guy was super intelligent. He passed away a few years ago. But his motto on the war on drugs was the CIA runs the drugs and the DEA is price control. And I thought, you talk about hitting a nail on the head on that one. And we'll just pause for a second, Patrick. So for my
Okay.
KEYK audience, again, thanks so much for tuning in to the Missouri Liberty Report. Again, you can reach me at mlreport at protonmail.com. That's mlreport at protonmail.com. And be sure to look up the Missouri Freedom Initiative on Twitter, on Facebook, on social media, and see the great things and
YouTube.
YouTube, yes. See the great things that they're doing. And I think we can appreciate anybody who's looking out for our freedom. And we'll see you all next week. All right, so continuing on. So, Patrick, any other bills that you're aware of that are looking to because on top of the medical marijuana, uh, the HB 2704, I know that there's somebody says there's Casey Rich says there's House Joint Resolution 83 is a constitutional amendment resolution to outright legalize cannabis. I do know there was another bill. It might have been a joint resolution. It said if recreational is legalized at that moment, all nonviolent, or I guess the actual wordage is most nonviolent marijuana offenses will be automatically expunged. There's another version that says legalizing recreational, but if you want your record expunged, then you have to pay a fee and fill out an application, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. If you're going to legalize it, just forget they ever did it. Forget it ever happened. Wipe the record clean and, lock it up and throw away the key. But I don't think people need to pay a fee on top of already being imprisoned for a plant to begin with. I think you should just be kind enough to say, okay, we're going to pretend like that never happened and expunge it. But are there any other bills that you know of, other than what you've mentioned, that are maybe coming down the pike to expand freedom and liberty here in Missouri?
Not for expansion necessarily. There is the Susie Pollock's bill. I forget the bill number right now. Oh gosh darn it. 2000 and something. And that bill is specifically designed to prevent vaccination centers from going into public schools because the federal government's trying to fund it. So that way they can keep vaccinating the kids over and over and over again, turning them into, little petri dish pincushions or something. Now, that's not what we want here in the state of Missouri. We don't want that. We don't want pressure from the federal government through the public school system to vaccinate kids. We want parents making that decision. That's what we want. We want parents to, control whether or not their kids are getting, the vaccine for the beer flu or whatever. Because believe it or not, they have more plans for just vaccines for the beer flu. I guarantee it.
Oh, yeah.
They have all kinds of vaccines planned. There's going to be HIV vaccines pretty soon, I think.
Yeah.
And And we won't get into that because that's unfortunately one of those YouTube topics that will get you in a lot of trouble real quick.
Yeah,
So
my
go ahead.
whole thing is, I guess maybe I'm going to say his name, but what Fauci did during HIV, the whole AIDS pandemic, and all that stuff, I
Mhm.
don't see how that man has any power at all. Just with AZT, what he did to people, I don't know how he has any power at all anymore. He should have been locked away in a prison cell.
He works, sure, but he works for the New World Order. I mean, he works for the
Yeah,
Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. He works for the Harrimans. I mean, he works for people who want to depopulate. Therefore, he has power because he is helping to depopulate the planet. So it's very, I know it sounds really conspiratorial, but I guarantee you it's the truth because that is what we're getting. That's the result of what we're getting right now. And everyone, in power wants to continue down that track. So it's unfortunately depopulation is becoming and we're going to use the word depopulation. We could say democide, but I don't know if everyone knows what that word means. That's what's going on right now. It's time for the powers that be to start thinning out the herd. Now, there's reasons for it. There's very specific. They'll say, "Well, gosh darn it, we need greener planet. We're using up too many resources. Your carbon footprint is too big. Over and over. We can come up with all this, but the fact of the matter is, they want communism worldwide, and it's easier to maintain with a smaller population." And I know it sounds strange. It sounds conspiratorial, but I guarantee you that's what their plans are. They write about this stuff. It's in The Economist. It's in the Economist magazine that's owned and run by the Rothschilds. You can find it in a bunch of literature that comes out from, uh, Saul Alinsky, from back in the 20s and 30s, who Chris Matthews cited as his hero and also Barack Obama's hero. We're talking communism here, gang. This isn't a joke. That's what's coming if we're not vigilant. If we don't start working this on our state level, that's what's coming on the federal level. That's what they want. More lockdowns, more extreme measures, more totalitarianism. That's what gets their rocks off on the federal level and the people who own and operate the federal government, which is not the people. That's why we don't focus our attention and our efforts at the federal level because we can't do anything there.
and you're talking about this depopulation. I mean, you go back and look at um, what Bill Gates has said. I mean, he's come right out and said it. Why he was doing
10 to
yeah,
15%.
what some of the things that he's done in Africa and India and some of these other countries. That's why he sterilized thousands of women in Africa. And he got caught doing it, and nothing really happened to him. Like, oops, my bad. Nothing happened to the
Yeah.
guy. So to sit there and watch him sterilize millions, or not millions, but thousands of African women, and then to turn around and go, well, it's not about population control. How can it not be? You think he just did that just
Yep.
to see if it worked? No. And, for someone who's supposed to be so supposedly benevolent and such a philanthropist, that tells you what he thinks of poor African people. Like, he thinks there's too many of them, so he'll just sterilize them so they can't reproduce so much. And I'm thinking, it's not a really your moral compass is definitely not pointing north if that's behavior that you're exhibiting towards a third world country or a third world nation. You're like, yeah, we'll just sterilize them. Then there won't be so many, and we won't have to deal with them. Okay, that's just that's just really, really weird. But yeah, I've seen it. You got the Georgia Guidestones discuss this. I mean, there's all kinds of evidence out there, but people have to be willing to do the research, read it, and then accept it because we've been lied to for so long. A lot of people have problems digesting this information and going, holy crap, I've been living a lie my whole life. Same thing for me, except my awakening was Aaron Russo's America, Freedom to Fascism. Some the friends that run the network, MOLibertyRadio.us, gave me a copy of it, said, watch it and tell us what you think. And that turned my whole world upside down, finding out that the federal income tax was illegal, and that I was told that I pay a tax so we can have all these programs. And then they're saying, no, you're just paying interest on the money that the Federal Reserve prints for our government. And that's the first thing I learned that turned my whole life around, had me thinking everything in 180. And I thought, now, I went on a whirlwind of reading books, watching documentaries. I was on a mission from there on out. And then, again, I was doing the Push for Liberty podcast and focusing on federal issues. And I decided, and it was accidental. I saw the Second Amendment Preservation Act. I had a short 15, 20-minute interview with Jared Taylor and things like that. And I thought, it got me thinking. So for a while, I was doing 2 podcasts, and then I just gave up the Push for Liberty and thought, it's time to start focusing on Missouri issues, because a lot, whether they're big-time conservative or liberal talk show hosts, they're all mainly focusing on federal issues. And I thought, there's not as many focusing on state issues. So maybe it's time I push in that direction. And now, I'm not saying I did it because I wanted more downloads, but the amount of downloads that I got after switching formats, it went way up. My listener numbers, my download numbers went way up, and I thought, okay, this is a good path to be on, because people apparently are starting to figure out that, more people are saying, well, if we do get our state in order, we can ignore the feds. We don't have to listen to these idiots anymore. And it doesn't matter if somebody says they're going to drain the swamp or build back better or whatever they're going to do. It doesn't matter what they do. And we have, I've stressed this to people at work who they come and talk to me about different political topics, and I say, right now we still have the ability to nullify. So why don't we take this opportunity to work on that and just ignore what the feds are doing?
Mm-hmm.
We have the chance, let's use the tools we have right now and start, again, getting our state in order. And then you wouldn't even have to turn on the 6 o'clock news anymore on CBS or NBC to see what the president or Congress said, because you'd be like, who freaking cares? We're not doing it here anyway. So go pee up a rope for all we're concerned.
Yep, I got several things to say on what you just said, which was awesome. First off, I do want to say hello to Casey Rich, Voodoo Queen, and Grant. I know they're watching us, and they're part of the organization. So I definitely wanted to give them a shout out, let them know that I'm acknowledging, that I see that they're here. And thank you guys for being here. And we'll answer all of your questions here in just a little bit. But you said before, something along the lines of living a lie. And we all were kind of living the lie, but that's basically the propaganda.
Right.
The thing is, I see Missouri, okay, and there's 2 major liberty movements going on in the United States for states. And then there's one federal one. The federal one is pretty much being done by Ron Paul. Now, there's all kinds of small, you've got your, I'm not going to forget the 10th Amendment Center. I got to give a shout out for Michael Bolden. But, you got Tom going, like crazy out there. And he's the big libertarian out there. And he's getting the views. He's getting the clicks. So the liberty movement is big. But when you look at it, okay, that's on a big scale. Let's look at it at a smaller scale right now. You have the Free State Project in New Hampshire. In order for that project to work, they have to import liberty-minded people from other states. That's what they do. They bring them in from other states, but that was their intent. That was what the project's all about. Missouri is a little different because we're homegrown. The Liberty Project in Missouri is literally working with the liberty-minded people in the state of Missouri. What we're doing is we're organizing them. That's the only difference. They were already there. They were just all by themselves in the wilderness, and they basically, they were thinking, well, what can I do? And they certainly weren't thinking about their state level. So all we're doing is letting them know about the massive grassroots movements. And but when I say massive, I mean I could go on and on about the movements in the state of Missouri. They're huge. I think we have it going on per capita 10 times bigger than any other single state has, including New Hampshire. So I think we will probably leapfrog New Hampshire in the Freedom Index within 2 years.
Wow.
2 years, no kidding. We have much better gun laws. We have much better pro-life laws. These are things that liberty-minded folks care about. Plus, they've got us beat on taxes, but we're working on that. And Bill Eigel's working on that this year, as a matter of fact, with 2 separate bills. But so, we could go on and on about it, but Missouri is a very special place. And I'm a transplant. I mean, I moved down here 26 years ago from Minnesota. But I am so proud and so happy with the folks that have, come out of the woodwork just from little old me having a YouTube channel talking about freedom in general, worldwide freedom, human rights, a little bit about the United States. But then the SEPA thing came up, and then that kind of changed my focus just a little bit to making sure that bill became a law in the state of Missouri. And that's when I realized that all of my focus really should be going into the state of Missouri and not worldwide freedom issues or human rights issues. Now, they're important. I'm not saying they're not. But if I dedicate my focus to the world, how much focus can the state of Missouri get? And that's the mentality I think that a lot of people who are starting grassroots organizations in the state of Missouri are thinking as well. But I am not alone. I am, like I said, maybe the most visible and vocal of my group, but I've got some very powerful members in my group that are doing a lot of work. And, I mentioned Voodoo Queen here. She's a mod, basically on our Facebook, on our YouTube channel. And she helps us out quite a bit too. But those of you who are watching in other states, get a hold of us. We'll let you know how we're doing it in the state of Missouri, how it works. But one thing I do want to say, and I don't want this podcast to go without me talking about a single man by the name of Ron Calzone. There's a man in the state of Missouri who is singularly one of the most liberty-minded people I think I've ever met before. And by the way, out of everyone I met, I think he is. So, but his distinctions are singular in nature. In fact, Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center told me personally that there's only 5 Ron Calzones in the United States of America. And he doesn't call them anyone else. He calls them Ron Calzones. So apparently Ron Calzone, as far as he's concerned, is the icing on that particular cake. That's the measure, the standard by which he's judging these other 4 men in other states. And we're just very fortunate to have him in the state of Missouri. He has been in the background doing things that made us freer in Missouri, and no one even knows what he does or how he does it. I know how he does it, because, he's a friend of mine. I meet him up in Jeff City all the time, when I'm up there stomping around, doing the halls up there. But so that made it easier for us in Missouri, for those of us who started grassroots organizations in the last 25 years, that made it easier because we had a Ron Calzone. But what we got to do is figure out who those other 4 Ron Calzones are from Mike Bolden and basically make sure that they get some love in their states so that some grassroots movements can grow up around them. And the grassroots movements, as far as I'm concerned, in the state of Missouri, grew up around Ron Calzone, including mine. Ron Calzone is a friend and a mentor.
Yeah, when I was on second shift and I would go in early, I would always listen to Gary Nolan's show, and I would hear Ron call in once a week, a lot of times if I was working that day, and listen to him, update. He would be listening to Supreme Court cases. He'd be listening to the legislature, giving us updates on all these bills and all these things. And I thought, this guy's busier than a one-legged man at a butt-kicking contest. I mean, he is just – I thought, how does this guy have all this time to just go here and go there? But it was so nice to hear from somebody who was right there on the spot and
Yep.
calling in. I mean, he's calling Gary saying, here's an update. Oh, we got Ron back on the phone. Here's an update. What's going on, Ron? And then Ron gives a short, oh, the court's getting ready to go back in session. I got to go. And away he
Yep.
goes. And I thought,
Yep.
holy crap, this guy is on it. Now, we can keep going. But, Patrick, I just want to add, at some point, if you know you're going up to Jeff City because something's going on, and if you would just, you can message me or whatever and say, hey,
Sure.
on this day, I'm going to be up in Jeff City. If it's a day that I can take a vacation day, I may, because I need to hang with you a little bit, just
Sure.
so I get an idea on how. That way, you can lead me on how you do things, how you interact with these guys,
Sure.
and I mean, I don't have to be right there like you're holding my hand, like, come on, buddy, let's do this. I can be in the background, but
Nope.
I need the guidance because if I'm walking up somebody new and I don't know them, I'm not going to be the most eloquent guy. I'm going to be standing there, stuttering and stammering just like I just did, trying to talk to someone and get my point across. But I kind of need somebody to just show me the ropes a little bit. So yeah, if you're ever going up there one day because something's going on, like I said, just shoot me a message. If I'm able to make it, be like, okay, I'm going to be there, and I want to witness this because at some point, if I want what I'm doing to grow, I'm going to have to get involved more than I am now. Right now, I'm just behind a microphone. I'm interviewing people, which is fine, but at some point, I'm going to have to expand on that if I want to get the information and I want to, get the real message out to people. I'm going to have to learn to do these things. So, if you would be
I can
willing to
give
do
you-
that.
You bet. In fact, I've got a lot to say about that too. And I'd like to give you a date here, April 26th. On April 26th, we have a gun rights rally in Jefferson City, and we have at least 2 of those a year. But that's one I am attending.
Okay.
And so put that on your calendar, April 26th up in Jefferson City. Now, more to your point, I'd be more than happy to help you out and show you, basically what I do, which is a little bit different than the average person does, but also too, I need to transfer some of these videos from Truth, Money, and Freedom podcasts to the Missouri Freedom Initiative, because what I used to do when we were trying to get SEPA done, I was live streaming on YouTube and I was calling these representatives and these senators on my phone on speakerphone live on YouTube so people could see how I was talking to these guys. And if I left a message, I would leave a message and everyone could hear exactly how I was leaving the message. But that was for SEPA. That was just for SEPA. So, basically when I go up there and I talk to these guys, and Casey Rich is up there all the time with me, when I'm up there. In fact, he's been up there more times this year than I have. But we also have another guy, screen named Joe Mama. His name is John. And he goes up there with us once in a while too, and he gets to see, the way I work with the Senate. Rich is excellent on dealing with these guys as well. So, but at any rate, yeah, it's not a big deal. And by the way, they're humans just like
Right.
we are.
Yeah. I don't know what my
So,
problem
you
is.
go in there and you talk to them. Well, and I think there's an intimidation factor because they're a politician, especially when it comes to, senator. But I just don't feel that way. These guys work for us.
Right.
They're hired to work for us. And so if they think that they have a greater calling than you and me, it better be God. Because if it's not God, then it's going to be Soros, or, it's going to be the Rothschilds or something like that. And that doesn't mean that all the Republicans are good Republicans in the state of Missouri. We do have some turds in the punch bowl. We
Dave
do.
Schatz.
We have, Dave Schatz is one of them. We call him Jabba the Shots, on our channel. And then we have, Lincoln Huff. We call him Senator Crab Cakes. We do come up with nicknames for these guys that rub us the wrong way.
What about Caleb Rowdy?
And then we have, Caleb the
go.
Rodent.
Oh
yeah.
boy.
Yep. So that's the triad of evil. that we kind of refer to them as, because they've backstabbed us and lied too many times. And they have. And we documented that on the YouTube channel. And I know they don't like us. More specifically, they don't like me. But at the same time, I hope they respect me because I'm telling the truth. And I know it hurts them and it rubs them the wrong way, but that's because they're lying.
Mm-hmm.
And Caleb Rowden is a difficult creature to figure out. Dave Schatz is a little easier for me to figure out. And Crab Cakes just has absolutely nothing to do with me.
Crab
So,
cakes.
But at any rate, but at the same time, I enjoy a lot of wonderful conversations with a lot of others. When I go up there and I talk to Onder, I have a great conversation. When I talk to Bratton, we can sit down and talk like we're old friends. Eric Burleson, Bill Eigel, the list goes on. So there are good folks up there too. But the deal is, if we're not willing to admit that we have problems in Missouri because we think we're awesome and we're the best state ever, we're not going to fix them. We're not going to fix these problems. We have to admit them first. And we do have corrupt people in Jefferson City. And it's uncomfortable to talk about, especially for a guy like me who goes up there and tries to talk to these guys because they know what I'm saying about them publicly. But their choice is to ignore me rather than to talk to me about this. That's their choice. That's not my choice. That's theirs. So equally with the governor. The governor would not have an audience with me, and I tried 2 times. And so I can't. So, we got a problem with the governor too. But the governor is most out of control when our General Assembly is out of session. So that's, that did not escape my attention either. So as long as our General Assembly is in session, the governor is basically pretty subdued.
Yeah.
So, but in any rate, I mean, in virtually every regard, when it comes to actually doing the grassroots thing, it's important for everyone to understand that all you have to do is do a quick search on the internet to find out if you have an organization for a cause that you want in your state. If you don't, it's relatively easy to get started. Please don't ignore the fact that, that social media is there for you. YouTube is there for you. Twitter's there for you. Mastodon, if you don't like Twitter, or you can move on to, I'm on another one. What's it called again? Getter. And so there's lots and lots of different platforms where you can get other like-minded people and then start organizing so that you guys can make phone calls, send emails, and make visits at the state level, no matter what state you're in, to, basically further the cause of freedom and liberty in your state. Missouri doesn't want to be the only state doing this. New Hampshire does, by the way. That's another long story. New Hampshire wants to be the only state with liberty. Yeah. That's what their goal is there at the Liberty
Can't
Project.
let them get away with that.
But nope, absolutely. I see it as a competition. You betcha. And, here's the Minnesota cutting out to me. You betcha. But we're not only going to compete with New Hampshire, we're going to beat them in less than 2 years. And that's because we don't need to import people into our state to get this stuff done. We already have enough people that think this way in the state of Missouri. All we got to do is get them activated, get them vocal, get them making phone calls, sending emails, and making visits to Jeff City.
Oh, I got to real quick on. You said April 26th, the gun rights rally. What time does that start?
The rallies are usually between 9 and 10 a.m. is when they start. So it's an early day for those of us who have to travel. But I'll tell you what. Just keep us. We'll stay in contact. And so when I get a time, I know it's the 26th. My guess is it's probably going to be 9 or 10 a.m. That's my guess.
I just drop my wife off
probably
at work
one of the two.
and then hang out for a while and then go up there. That's what I'm going to do this month at the 26th. I'm going to go drop my wife off at work, hang out for a bit, then go up and hear Hicks and some other speakers on House Bill 2704. And I'm hoping that I can pull him or Hicks aside to pick his brain on. And then he may elaborate. I'm hoping to get some recordings of audio while I'm up there that I can play on a podcast so people can kind of hear it from the horse's mouth on his intentions behind the bill, which, again, I'm pretty sure I know why. But, people want to hear from the guy who wrote the bill, so I'd like to get it straight from him. So,
Sure.
Well, yeah, Patrick, it's been great talking to you. And I hope next time that there's a Texas County meeting again. I'm hoping I'll be able to make that trek next time. And
Yep. Travis with the Prepared Homestead is what
yeah,
he's referring
okay,
to, by the way. The Prepared Homestead on YouTube. Travis is a very good friend to our organization. And another fun fact about Travis, he has the largest public homestead meetings in the United States, right in Texas County, Missouri. The last meeting was somewhat smallish, 150, 200 people, but normally it's significantly larger than that. And so, and once again, it's not just about homesteading. I mean, I speak at most of his meetings, actually, and I talk about the state of things in the state of Missouri legislatively, with the politics in general with the state, but mainly having to do with legislation that furthers our freedoms. And so I talk about that at his meetings. But there's all kinds of speakers at his meetings, and these are liberty-minded folks. These are our folks. These are our peeps, and we're theirs. And what we got to do is grow. And so basically, all we have to do is find these people. This is one thing that the whole reason we started this organization was trying to bring together all these individual organizations that all want liberty and freedom. We found out, or this is what I found out when I was a pro-lifer. I'm sorry, I'm still a pro-lifer. When I was working the pro-life, like I'm working, the other stuff here now, what I found out was the pro-lifers were also pro-gun. They were pro-Second Amendment. And what I found out was the pro-Second Amendment folks were pro-gold and silver, pro getting away from the dollar, getting away from the fiat currency. And there was just all these overlapping causations in all these individual organizations. But they all want the same thing. They just want more freedom, and they're willing to take the responsibility for their freedom. And that's what, gave us the idea to actually start up this organization after SEPA got done. And so I wasn't going to switch horses until SEPA was done. And when SEPA got done and was signed by the governor, we set up this new organization here to safeguard SEPA and just further any type of liberty related legislation that was coming down the pike in the state of Missouri.
yeah. Like I said, I'd really like I hope to make the next meeting and see you face to face and some of these other people and kind of get a chance to meet and talk, and because if Travis would be willing to come on at some point and do an interview with me and some of these other folks, because I would love to have people from these groups just come on, spend as much time as they have, and just talking about things they're passionate about, so that my listeners know who they are. Because there's a network here in the town that I live in that this goes through, a station in the Lake of the Ozarks, and then another network, internet network out of Michigan, that also carries this. So I'm hoping that, because he lives in Michigan, and poor guy. We know what Whitmer's, or as we refer to Nit Whitmer, what she's done to that state during COVID and other things. But Darren's a small government, limited powers type of, as much freedom as we can get guy. So, I'm hoping to draw enough people's attention to every single group that you know of and people that and give these people a chance to speak, let people know what they've accomplished, what they're working on. Because if we don't give these people the voice and let them be carried wherever we can, let's face it, the newspapers and these little media companies, they're not going to give them the time of day. So if you and I are not doing this, then nobody's going to do it.
That's a great point. That's a great point, because here's the deal. I talked about Ron Calzone. Everyone in Missouri knows we're different and we seem to have more freedoms, but I think they think it's just because it's Missouri. No, it's because there's people working their butts off in the background to make it happen. Ron Calzone is one of those folks, and that's exactly right. So, and very few people know about him. MissouriFirst.org, by the way, is Ron's organization. please go there, sign up to be on his email list, and he'll let you know about any legislation that's coming down the pike that, number one, increases your freedoms, or number two, detracts from your freedoms. That's what he does. But also, he does so much more than that. I don't want to get into it now. And during the legislative season, it's virtually impossible to get Ron unless you're up in Jeff City, but for an interview, I mean. So, but he also does what's called witness forums. And he's like the only guy in the entire United States doing this. And what that means is if there's a bill that's coming up that's going to be heard in the Senate or in the House, if you can't go to Jeff City and speak literally to that committee about that bill, you can fill out a witness form on Ron's website. He delivers it to that committee for you. So it's the next best thing to being there. He calls it a witness form. He invented it. And so I do believe we're the only state in the entire 50 United States that has someone that's doing anything like that. So it's entered as evidence, basically anytime there's a hearing for something, these are witness forms from the people who can't necessarily drive up to Jeff City for that day to testify in front of a House committee or in front of a Senate committee. He does so much for us. And he's been a big inspiration for me. I don't think I'll ever have the impact that he's had, but it's because of Ron. Ron has a huge impact. You mentioned you knew of Ron from Gary Nolan's show. Jody Grace knows of Ron and talks to him once in a while as well. I mean, Ron's a big inspiration for all of us liberty-minded folk here in the state of Missouri trying to get the good work done. So I'll stop now because it sounds like, it's like, the Ron Calzone show or something, but he is very special, and we're very fortunate to have him in the state of Missouri. Currently, according to the 10th Amendment Center, Mike Bolden, there's only 4 other men like him in the United States of America. That's it. That's all we got.
Ugh.
5 people like Ron Calzone and 4 others that are trying very, very hard to make the states they live in freer and better for their people, and people don't even know they exist.
I hope to God I can meet Ron face to face one of these days. Even I know he's a busy guy, and I don't expect him to take a lot of time out of his day. I would just like to meet the man and thank him because, like I said, I've learned a lot from him just listening to him on Gary Nolan. I learned so much from him on the chances that I got to hear him talk and how knowledgeable he was on everything. I thought, man, anybody that's, and it's just the same with Michael Bolden. Michael Bolden's a one-man show at the 10th Amendment Center, but he's a wealth of information, and I'm hoping next month, he told me to give him a couple months, and I know he's a super busy guy, but I'm going to make every attempt to get him on because now he gets a little more attention from like Mark Levin and some of the big, conservative talk show hosts because they don't like him because he's like nullification, and those guys want to focus on the federal side, and he's saying, well, you just nullified at the state and you're good. But I'm really hoping to get him on so people understand the work that he does as well. But for people that don't know, this is Patrick being on my podcast is all stems from a short conversation that we back and forth on Twitter. I did the same thing with Michael Bolden and said,
Yep.
I'd love to have you on sometime. He said, well, right now it's crazy for me. Give me a little time. And I said, I'll give you a couple months and be back in contact with you. And Patrick, I didn't expect it to happen this fast. I was thrilled that you could come on the next week and be on here with me, but I'm really hoping to get Michael on. I really enjoyed my talk with Robert Brown a couple weeks ago on on his talking about the Convention of States, because again, that's another topic. People really want a Convention of States, these conservative talk show hosts, and it was vitally important that people understood that the states that send the delegates, the courts, no one has control over the Convention of States. There's literally no control measures in place. They could go up there and screw things up big time. But if you listen to popular radio and you listen to the media on the conservative side, they'll make you think, oh, we could have this delegation of people, and they'll just fix the federal government. And Robert's tearing that whole argument down. So somebody else that people needed to hear from, I mean, he's got a whole constitutional series on YouTube called The Constitution is the Solution, and I would urge my listeners and anybody else to check his videos out because he goes way more into depth than a lot of the other series on the Constitution do. And he worked with the John Birch Society for I think 10 years. Robert knows his stuff, like Ron Calzone knows his stuff, and Michael Bolden knows his stuff. We have got to get these people out in front of the citizens of Missouri to make them understand, hey, just because Sean Hannity or Mark Levin says so does not make it true. These guys make an awful lot of money convincing you have to do things a certain way, and then you have the Ron Calzones and Michael Boldens of the world that says, no, you can ignore the feds, fix your state, and nullify. And that's the most beautiful
these
thing.
guys wouldn't be on Main Street. Yeah, these guys wouldn't be on Main Stream if they were talking about nullification. Right. I mean, Judge Napolitano did talk about nullification, and then he was taken off the air. You don't get to talk about that and maintain a show. That's the reason why. The people who really, truly know how the Constitution works, how the 10 Amendments work, and what precedence is for 10th Amendment issues such as, nullification through anti-commandeering doctrine, are not going to be allowed to talk on mainstream media because literally they can tell you literally how to literally totally ignore the federal government's laws in your state. I mean, it is very simple. I mean, these guys know. Some people would say, well, that's wizardry. You know that? Yes, it is. It's wizardry because they simply know the laws, how the laws work. And there's two sets of laws here. We have common law and we have corporate law. Mm-hmm. So there's two sets of laws to remember that as well. That's another big conversation. That would be about a 6-hour podcast to actually help people understand the two legal systems that we have in the United States of America. And they're both valid systems. One of them gives you your freedom and the other one doesn't. And the one that we practice in the courtrooms of America doesn't let you have your freedom. That's not common law. That's corporate law, also known as maritime law.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the mainstream media and doesn't allow for talk of nullification. You know, you go to Tom Woods. Tom Woods wrote a book called Nullification. But then there was, crickets from the media. Now, when he wrote Meltdown on the 2008 housing bubble and the crash, he had all kinds of people.
And he got attention.
All kinds of attention saying, this wasn't created by capitalism. This was created by regulations and everything else. But when he wrote Nullification, the only people that wanted to talk to him were people that already had an idea of what it was, and then that was it. Mainstream media was not. Now, John Grady's saying, John, I don't know how you did this. You are all set to meet and talk to Representative Hicks on the 29th. John Grady, you're awesome. Appreciate it. Awesome. John knows somebody. Oh, he said, I'll have Epen make that happen for you. John Grady's the man right now. He's he's my bro. And I just have to hope that I don't sound like a stammering fool when I talk to him. I will make it very short so I don't make a fool of myself. But before we go, Patrick, is there anything else that you would like for the listeners to know about, again, I'll let you rattle off your websites, your Twitter handle, all that stuff. I'll let you name it off so I don't butcher it. Where people can find you, how they can find out more about what you're doing and what's going on in the state.
Sure. Okay. First off, our main focus are two bills right now. I fail, and then Susie Pollack, I'm so sorry. I failed to remember your bill number, but it has to do with preventing basically children from being forcibly vaccinated in order to stay in the public school system.
Yeah.
So, yep. Now, the other one is 2118, and that's the Aaron Doors, stand your ground, basically just putting it in a much, much firmer foundation. So what happened to the McCloskeys can never happen to anyone again.
Okay, can I interrupt you real quick? Because I saw that, I don't know if it's that bill. There was a bill that I covered a few weeks ago, and they called it the Make Murder Legal Act because instead of you having to go in front of a jury and prove your self-defense case, you just went in front of a
Hmm.
judge, and then the judge decided if you had, there was legal precedent for you to defend yourself instead of having to go to a jury trial and insert self-defense into the trial. Is that it, or is that something else?
No, that
Okay.
is it. Basically, what it is right now, understand your ground law. You have to prove your innocence. Unfortunately, this is a loophole. So in America, we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. So what this does is make them prove that you are guilty, just like it would be for any other law in the state of Missouri. So basically the burden shifts to law enforcement and prosecutors and the court system to prove that you killed someone out of malice rather than them coming after you. And by the way, it's not just killing people, it's brandishing a firearm too. Stand your ground law doesn't mean just, someone comes into your property and is threatening you and you shoot them. I mean, we're talking about brandishing a firearm too, like the
Right.
McCloskeys did. So the burden will shift to law enforcement, prosecution, and the courts. So that's what this is about. That's House Bill 2118. And so at any rate, that's one thing that we're concentrating on right now. And then Susie Pollock's the other one. Ben Baker's bill never did make it out again, which is the anti-COVID tyranny bill. And he had it last year, and it was slated for passage in the Senate shortly after SEPA was passed. But as you remember, the Democrats shut down the Senate after SEPA passed last year in 2021. So, so they just decided they didn't want to work anymore, I guess. And so, at any rate, that's what we do, gang. I mean, we focus on the legislation that gives us the most liberty. We did try to get a piece of legislation entered in ourselves this year that would have turned gold and silver into legal tender in the state of Missouri, along with having a state repository for keeping 20% of state reserves. But that, because of all the crap that was going on with redistricting, that ended up not happening. So, and that's a long story too, but we did try. So we're just all about freedom and liberty. Anything that gives the people more freedom and more liberty is what we're about. And so with Christian values, and I think basically there's other organizations too. They have other focuses, but they're also on liberty and freedoms as well. We just really have it going on here. If you guys want to check out our website, and it's always a work in progress, by the way, and that is the MissouriFreedomInitiative.com. MissouriFreedomInitiative.com. And I'll buy a few more domains to make it a little easier to get to. Our next biggest platform would be Twitter. And also Missouri Freedom Initiative. Just look up Missouri Freedom Initiative on Twitter. And we're big on Getter as well. Getter, Getter.com. And also Missouri Freedom Initiative, and also on Discord. We do our live streams from within Discord. The reason being, we want Missourians to come in live and talk during our live streams and tell us what's important to them, so that because politicians are watching our show. So we want the politicians to be able to hear it right from the horse's mouth. This is not about what I want. This is about what we want in the state of Missouri. We want freedom. We want liberty. And I can't have every idea. I can't come up with everything. So the more folks we have involved in this movement, the better. And and what really and I do this for my daughter and my grandkids. But what I really have a lot of respect for is those guys out there doing this that don't have kids and they don't have grandkids, and they're into this fight for liberty and freedom. That really amazes me, because I don't know that I would have sacrificed as much as I had to do what I've done in the state of Missouri if I didn't have my daughter and my grandkids, because I think about them constantly. And but at any rate, yeah, that's where you can find us. And if you're watching from another state, my goodness, this is an easy enough thing to get started. Contact, the Missouri Liberty Report or myself through my website. through Discord, through Twitter, whatever. Let us know that you're in another state and you want to start a movement like this, or you want the Second Amendment Preservation Act in your state, and we will definitely help get you started. Casey Rich, one of our gang here, just started his own channel, and that is SEPA Central, is what he's calling it, because he's trying to help other states. We got a guy here to help other states get SEPA. You know, we don't want to be the only ones.
Awesome.
You know, we don't. We want freedom everywhere. So, so that's, you know, pretty much what we do. SEPA, or the Second Amendment Preservation Act, is kind of our claim to fame. We've worked on a few other things, but not as big as SEPA. So, but getting SEPA done is, in fact, a miracle. The fact that we got it done with teeth, with ramifications for law enforcement if they break the law, you know, the occupational immunity is gone now, you know, from law enforcement if they break your Second Amendment freedoms, if they literally infringe upon them by, you know, charging you, you know, or going after you with federal charge codes using federal laws. And we can now change the laws in the state of Missouri to whatever we as Missourians believe it should be. So, you know, I'm talking about gun laws here, gang. We don't acknowledge federal gun laws here anymore. So we have state laws, but they're very close to federal laws. So it's not like people are running around, you know, with machine guns, you know, shooting machine guns or anything like that. It's not like that here. It's more about preventing red flag laws, you know, gun confiscations, registrations. This is what it's all about. We don't participate in that because of the Second Amendment Preservation Act, and there are ramifications for those who do participate in that.
So on Discord, do you just look up Missouri Freedom Initiative there?
Yep, that's correct. I think that's it. If you want, I can send you through Skype an invite into our Discord. Our Discord is quite popular, especially when we're doing live streams. A lot of folks come in.
That'd be great.
So I will get you that through Skype. And then if you want to, go ahead and put it on your video or something, or put it in the comments section. I'll get you a no limit, never expire link.
Appreciate that.
There we go. You bet.
Yeah, and I will put that in the comments section for everybody so they can see it. And then on on Spreaker and everything, that'll be in the show notes as well.
Yep.
And that way, anybody, you know, we listen, folks. I'm not doing this for my benefit. I'm doing this for everybody's benefit. That's the reason I do this podcast. It's not for me to listen to myself talk. I truly, because I have a daughter that's graduated, I have a son graduating this year, I would really like them to grow up in a state where they get to make more choices, keep more of their money, and make more of their own decisions without having a middleman in the middle of every interaction, whether it be business or just between two consenting adults. I'd really like for them to be able to do their thing without asking the government for permission. And I'm talking about, you know, if it was up to me, we wouldn't have to, you know, a business. I would love to work in my town. I have seriously considered running for city alderman, and one of my big things is to say, can we just eliminate the business licensure and all this ridiculousness that you just impose fees on someone who's trying to bring a business to your town to offer people a product or service? Why are they having to beg permission from you? Can't we just let people open a business? And I know what people think. Well, if they have a license, there's accountability. There's numerous examples of businesses, big businesses, that had licenses that still screwed people out of money and did all kinds of things. Having a license does not make you morally superior to your customers. It's just a way of government extorting money from you. So I'd love to work on licensure. I'd love to have something in the state of Missouri that says, a woman who's training to cut hair and hair dyeing wouldn't have to fork out $13,000 to go to school to learn how to cut hair. That's just absurd. And then people are like, well, it's cost of haircut's really going up. Well, when you have to spend $12,000 to learn to cut hair, that's a problem. You're going to have a cost. Licensure automatically drives up costs. So those are some of the things that I would like to see worked on in the future is just getting rid of some of these licensing fees and all the permits that you have to get in order just that you can't even start a business until you ask permission from some government bureaucrat. And I would love, I mean, if we're going to allow people to be as prosperous as they can, that's an issue that we really have to work on. Not just property tax, but all the permission slips that you have to fill out in order to run a business here in the state of Missouri. But again, we could spend 2 hours on licensure and regulations and laws, and I don't have that much time because I've been it sounds awful, but I've been holding back yawns. It was a long day today. Inventory day, standing around for over half the day, trying not to fall asleep at work, and then trying not to fall asleep on the way home, and then having to take a nap when I got home after eating supper. So, Patrick, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on with me. I think I'm going to try really, I think I'm going to make the gun rally on the 26th. Again, I will be up at the Capitol building for HB 2704. Talk to Representative Hicks. Hear this rally. It's time for me to get off the chair and from behind the microphone and actually become a little more involved. So that's
Yep. And by the way, just so people know, that's April
right, April 26th. Sorry.
So, yep. Okay.
Well, Patrick.
Yep. And thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And, I know that I've got some things to learn from you. And with that information, I can pass it on to my listeners, and maybe we can get, the next time an important bill comes up, maybe we can push that threshold of phone calls up to the representatives and, push that. We're hitting rookie numbers. We can do better than that, right, Patrick? I mean, we can double that.
Absolutely. We can triple
put
it.
the pressure on.
Yeah. And frankly, I meant during SEPA, the amount of co-sponsors, I'm going to once again say how popular SEPA was. This is incredibly important for those of you who live in Missouri. The SEPA bill in the House, it's HB 85, that's from 2021, had literally 89 co-sponsors in the House. No bill in the state of Missouri has ever had that level of co-sponsorship. Now, and if you go talk to anyone who is in the House or in the Senate, they have never received as many phone calls, emails, and visits over any single issue before like they'd seen with SEPA. In fact, a lot of them said it was overwhelming. So that's how we got SEPA done, by sheer brute force, by turning out the numbers. But it was social media that helped this, process along. This is literally what it's all about. People just didn't know. And as soon as they found out, they were like, how can I get involved? Which was really great. And you're right. The more people get involved in state government to do things like this, the easier it is to get it done. It's that simple. It really is that simple, gang. And 12 phone calls to a senator can change their mind on a single issue. Believe it or not, 12 phone calls. It doesn't take much. People need to stop their focus in D.C. Totally stop. Just forget D.C. exists. Start working on your states. It doesn't matter what state you're in. Every state deserves freedom. Even California and New York.
That would be a tough road to hoe, but if people would just educate themselves and understand, and finally get, especially in California, finally get fed up enough. When they recalled Newsom, I thought they might be onto something, and then he just gets right back in, and I thought, well, there went that thought. That was
with an overwhelming majority vote. How did that happen?
Well, I'm sure there's numerous reasons that happened, and I'm sure. Listen, it sounds conspiratorial, but I heard of people being turned away at the polling locations. I mean, I heard numerous stories where they said, "Oh, you already voted," and they're like, "No, I haven't." I saw a lot of stories on that. The thing that blew me away the most is poor Larry. Was it Larry Sharp? who got egged as he was walking down the street? He
I don't
was
remember.
he's a black gentleman running against Newsom, and he's walking down the street. Someone threw an egg at him, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, you tolerant liberals, you. Here, you say you're for the minorities. Here's one running in an opposite party, and you throw an egg at him. So yeah, that's
He's not their
right.
kind of
That's
minority.
exactly right.
You know?
He's not a plantation type. He's like, hey, I'd like to get off the plantation. Thank
See,
you very kindly. Larry Elder,
see,
thank you, Grant.
this is exactly the poison in America. The poison in America is literally the divisions forced on us by government. This is the biggest problem we have in America, by far. It will destroy us. You know the old saying, united we
Yep.
stand, divided we fall. Well, we're completely divided. We can be conquered so easily now. And it's a left-right paradigm thing. And either you believe the government story on COVID or you don't believe the government story on COVID. And by the way, if you don't buy the government story on COVID, you just might be a terrorist. Setting out divisive statements like that, it's like when, Barack Obama stood up and said, oh, that little boy could have
Oh
been
yeah.
my son.
Mm-hmm.
That kid that was killed, or what was his name?
Yeah, Trayvon Martin.
Yep. Yeah. So it's all this divisiveness, that we enjoy now in the United States, separating us right and left, basically. And we think of it on the political paradigm. But what it is those who want to be controlled we have here in America. And there are plenty of people there that literally want to be completely controlled. The only problem is they want the others to be controlled with them, because it's not fair if they get controlled if the others are not getting controlled. And therein lies the philosophical problem we have here in America. They won't leave us alone. When they say stuff like, when Biden said stuff like, well, if you don't buy the government story on COVID, you're a potential terrorist. If you're a libertarian, you're a potential yeah, I want property rights. That makes me a terrorist. Of course it does. Because the other side doesn't want property rights.
Wasn't it 2008 or 2012 when Ron Paul was running right here in Missouri? We had a report. If you had a Ron Paul bumper sticker on your car, you were considered a threat.
Yeah. Yep. Or if you had a pro-life sticker on your car,
or a former military,
that made you. Yep. So these are the standards the federal government's trying to set up, which is more evidence that they want to take us into communism. Remember, folks, it's not because, Chuck Schumer is evil. It's because he's controlled by evil people. Same thing with Nancy Pelosi. And I don't want to get too much into the right-left paradigm, but I wasn't very happy with Trump at all. And I can give a lot of different reasons. I liked him the first 6 weeks he was in office. After that, I stopped liking him so much. I have a lot of reasons for it, but all I care about is liberty and freedom. And if a Republican is not into liberty and freedom, I'm not going to be their friend.
Yeah.
It's that simple. The right-left paradigm does not exist in my world.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, you're either with liberty or with the Constitution, or you're not. That's the two divides we should be talking about here. That's what, if we could say it that way in the mainstream media, that would wake an awful lot of people up. Instead of saying, well, if you don't think the vaccines are a good thing, I'm sorry, the serums are a good thing, then you just might be a terrorist. I don't think that's a really good way to approach people.
Yeah, I
free pretty much to do whatever you want as long as you don't, impede on someone else's freedom. And if it comes down to, you give total control to the federal government or else, because that's pretty much what they say, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get the jab or else. You go get tested for COVID or else. You stand with the Ukraine or else. You have to, honor George Floyd or else. I mean, it's just on and on and on, crisis after crisis. They let Antifa and BLM, run wild in the streets, destroy property, burn buildings down, and that's okay. That's okay. They're just expressing their First Amendment rights. Yet a bunch of people go to the Capitol on January 6th, with weapons of words
Mm-hmm.
and flags and banners, and they become
And
terrorists.
insurrectionists.
Terrorists, insurrectionists. That's right. Like AOC, poor AOC, she was just scared to death. She thought she was going to die, even though she was like 4 blocks away in a different building completely. And so it's all about divisions,
Yep.
gang. For those of you who hung out to the very end of this, and I'm sorry to wait so long to talk about it, but this is the divide and conquer strategy. This is actually part of Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, a communist, wrote about this. This is why it's embraced right now. I mean, this is literally how you convert a society like ours that has liberty and freedom into communism is through divide and conquer. That is exactly how you do it. And then overwhelming the system with welfare, too. That's a big one, too.
We're talking about COVID, and I just want to say this briefly because I know I have libertarian friends that I irritated, but libertarians ticked me off to no end. Not all of them, but the National Party and a lot of state parties. When COVID hit, the door was swung wide open for one party or one group of people to come in and say, this is absolutely not the way to do things right now. And they were eerily silent for a year and a half. And then all of a sudden, I think it was the Libertarian Party of Kentucky came out against vaccine passports. And then suddenly the rest of them popped out. Now, you got guys like Tom Woods, Ron Paul, the whole time talking about it. But the parties were eerily silent. And I thought, here was your they literally opened up the door and said, come on in, guys. And you went, this might not be politically expedient of us to do this right now. This might make us look bad. The Libertarian Party had probably the best shot of really getting people to listen to them, and they blew it. And so it's the same thing with Republicans and Democrats. There are certain candidates that I like, and there are certain libertarians that I like, but I know that the left seems to have infiltrated libertarians, especially at the national level. Now, Mises Caucus guys are totally different, but the national level, like Nick Sarwark and some of these other guys, they drive me nuts because it's like they're left-leaning libertarians, and there's certain subjects they think they should be off limits. And it's like, so even in the Libertarian Party, we've got to get to a point where we're like, okay, guys, think about it. We just had probably the best opportunity we've had in years to bring people to the message, and we blew it. Now, don't get me wrong, Tom Woods' traffic went way up because he talked about this the whole time. He brought a lot of people over. Ron Paul talked about this a lot. He brought more people in. COVID did bring more people to the freedom movement because a lot of people finally figured out just how tyrannical their governors or even their mayors could be. But it's a shame that we had to go through 2 years of that just obnoxious crap to get people to go, man, government really, really screwed the pooch on that one. And to me, it was disappointing. Now, you saw a business here and a business there trying to stand up to the mandates. And I was so disappointed to not see business owners come together, put the competition to the side and say, we're all not going to shut down. None of us are going to go along with the mandates. Because these cities didn't have enough police officers and enough health department officials to come in and close them all down. They would have been met with a lot of opposition. And I hope to God that COVID was a turning point in this country where people say, yeah, we're not doing that again. But, I guess it's going to be what the government comes up with next to scare the people with and how they react. But I really hope that that people remember this, what's been going on since Biden got in office, while Trump was in office, and all this COVID nonsense. And I hope that next time more people stand up and go, yeah, I remember this movie last time we watched it. I didn't like the ending on that one. So how about we just stop production of this movie and we figure out a different way to do things, and I get to live my life and you just leave me the hell alone. But, it's hard to say what's going to happen, because I thought after 9/11 and the mass surveillance state that maybe people would have less trust in government, but when they switched topics to a deadly pandemic, as Nancy Pelosi put, an invisible enemy, man, the fear state kicked in, and a lot of people that I thought would say, I don't like what's going on, just bought it hook, line, and sinker. And it was really disappointing to me, but it's also a little there's a little optimism, because a lot of people finally figured out that no matter what their politicians say at the time of election, that they can turn into little miniature Hitlers if you give them the opportunity. Are you still there, Patrick?
Yep,
Okay.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yep.
Okay.
And we saw that, and it's something that, after 9/11, everyone said, I don't believe the government story on 9/11, by the way, but the theme was never forget.
Right.
And I'm going to ask people to keep that in mind when it comes to what happened worldwide with COVID. Never forget the totalitarians that came out of the woodwork. Never, ever forget how obscenely totalitarian our politicians became instantly, like snapping your fingers. Never forget the fact that Australia has fallen. They were socialists when COVID started. Now they're communist. Never forget, all the horrors that came out, the skeletons, and in every single government's closet, became literally totalitarianism. And we have to remember that it is very, very difficult to get out of communism. Now, there are those in the United States that say that that's a better government. You have to remember now, to get out of that government, if you decide you don't like it, a lot of people have to give their lives to get out of that kind of government. So you don't have to give your life to slip from freedom into communism, but you will have to give your life to slip from, or to get back from communism into something that's more freedom oriented. And that's a fact. So if you're okay with communism, and you see, China seems to be doing fine, and it seems to be okay, and that seems to be better, then try living in one of those countries that have communism. Try going to Venezuela, Cuba, China. Try living in one of those countries first before trying to change our country, because there's an awful lot of people here that would prefer freedom.
Absolutely. Couldn't say it any better myself. Well, Patrick, I want to thank you for your time this evening. I'm glad we got to go this long and really turn some things over and discuss some topics. So again, I'll be in touch, especially before April 26th, but I'll just send you messages randomly here and there when I see a bill, or if you see a bill I might be interested in, feel free to message it to me, and I will look into it and bring it up to my my audience. But again, thanks so much for joining me this evening. I really greatly appreciate your time.
You bet, man. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
All right, take care.
You too. Take care, man.
All right, folks. Well, that is Patrick Holland. And again, appreciate him coming on with me this evening, discussing all these things. We need to know about people who do good works. We've got to know these groups that do good work, that are pushing freedom and liberty, and we've got to make sure that their voices are heard here in the state of Missouri and around the country, so we can be, we can make our state more free and make the people more prosperous, but we also need to be a shining light for other states that they can learn from our example and push to be the same way. So, for those of you out there that haven't listened to MOLibertyRadio.us yet, especially on Sunday nights from 6 to 9 p.m. Central with Sam and Trish Britton and Off the Cuff Radio, I would suggest that you check them out. Also, don't forget to check out KEYK. You can find them at keyradio.live or keygatheringplace.com. And also, be sure to check out Govern America, Darren Weeks Network. Check out all those. Plus, check out podcasts like Tom Woods, The Tom Woods Show, Ron Paul's Liberty Report, Good Morning Liberty. So much great information out there. But again, don't forget about the MissouriFreedomInitiative.com. Find them on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and join in on discussion. Tell them some things you'd like to see done. They want to hear input. They want to push liberty and freedom, and that's why I'm doing this podcast. That's why Patrick and others are doing what they do. The Ron Calzones and other people he mentioned. That's why they're doing the things they do, because they want to see freedom and liberty in the state of Missouri. So, again, thanks so much, everyone, for joining me. Patrick's crowd that joined in, Casey, Grant, Voodoo Queen, all of you that joined in, greatly appreciate you coming over and joining me for this interview of Patrick Holland. And again, everybody, thanks so much, and we'll see you again next week for another edition of